Hello, hello. Thank you everybody for joining the podcast. It's June 9th, 2024, and we've got Sarah Watt today as a special guest. Hello.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me. And I love that you say it's June 9th because it's actually June 10th in Australia where I live. So it's winter here, you're in summer, we're a day ahead. It's all a little bit crazy, but I like it.
And yeah, it's afternoon here, nice and hot, and it's morning where you're at. So good morning.
Good morning.
Australia. Have you ever traveled up here to Canada, like Vancouver,
I've
BC?
been to Vancouver. I've been to Vancouver once, which I loved. I would love to spend more time in Canada. My brother Brendan Watt did an access consciousness class there. Maybe like 2019 or something like that. I think it was a choice of possibilities class, I'm pretty sure. And I loved it. I fell in love with Vancouver. I mean, it was full on, like it was kind of this weird combination of like city and nature, and there was like a lot of different energies there, but I was like, I would love to come back and see more of this country. It hasn't happened yet, but I do travel a lot, so I'm sure in the future I'd love to come and just explore the wilderness and the nature there for sure. I just love the outdoors. I think that's why I live in Australia. I mean, it's so far away from everything, but the nature here is unbelievable. The land is amazing. So yeah, definitely a big draw card for me.
That's cool. Out in Australia. Yeah. I saw a statistic that Australians are the happiest. Like and I was like, oh, cool. Yay, I get to talk to you today. A happy person. Um, yeah, like I'm interested in Australia because I've never been. So it's like, do you like, just out of curiosity, do you like spend a lot of time in the water? Like, what's fun in Australia? I mean, I know there's a lot of access classes and I see the tours there and I'm like, what would it take? And I'm gonna switch my CF to Australia, I think, as well. So
Yeah. And if you do choose to come next year, we've moved it. Usually it's in February each year, but we're actually doing it in March in 2025. And then right after the certified facilitator training, we're actually doing a class in the middle of Australia. So this is kind of a cool sort of question to ask me about the nature and sort of the land here a little bit, because we're doing this class at this place called Uluru. And Uluru used to be called Ayers Rock. Ayers Rock was kind of like white man's name for this huge rock formation. But anyway, it's this rock formation pretty much in the dead center of Australia. Australia comprises mostly of desert. The people live along the coasts where there's water and it's much more inhabitable. But we also live in parts of the desert, and Uluru is this huge rock. And if you are listening to this podcast, go Google it. It's Uluru, Uluru. And this rock formation, they dated it that one half of it is like 520 million years old. And then the other half of it is like 600 and something million years old. It's like one of the oldest formations of land on this planet. So yeah, anyway, we're doing a class in that, 10 minutes away from that huge rock next year, called Being the Source. That's what the class is going to be called. And Gary Douglas, the founder of Access Consciousness, along with Dane here, the co-creator, and Simone Milasas are all going to facilitate like a very free form class in the desert. I mean, we won't be in the desert because it gets really fucking hot, but we'll be in a nice venue in the desert. And you can actually go and spend the early mornings and go and explore Uluru. There's another beautiful rock formation out there called Katajuda, which is also amazing to go hiking and exploring out there. So to sort of answer your first question, Australia is very diverse. I mean, the only thing we suck at is snow and mountains. Uluru is this rock formation, but it's not very high. Like it's kind of this like dome shape. We don't do mountains and snow very well. We've got a couple of mountains that have snow on them, but it's not great snow, but they're beautiful mountains. But apart from that, we do everything else very well. We do coast, we do beaches, we do the desert. We do rainforests, we do different types of forests, but beaches, I would say, is what attracts most people to come to Australia. And I actually was born and grew up like very close, within minutes of the beach. The majority of my childhood was spent. But it's kind of funny because I'm actually much more of a land creature, I would say. I love horses. I love walking and being in nature. So it was always interesting growing up where I was like, I feel like I was born into the wrong family because I only ever dreamed of being out on the land riding horses and being around nature. So it's kind of interesting. I did spend a lot of my childhood at the beach. Like every weekend we would be surfing. We used to go, on camping adventures where we would take our four-wheel drives onto the beach and go camping in the beach. And my stepdad and my brothers would surf all the time. So I pretty much was, the beginning of my life was being at the beach. But the thing I'm so grateful for with my childhood and with the country that I was born and have lived in is just the connection it's given me to the land. And now wherever I go, I travel the world a lot, facilitating access consciousness classes, but I also work very closely with the business of access. Everywhere I go, I'm always looking to find the different parts of the world and what their nature and what the land has to offer in those parts of the world, because it's all so very different, but in a lot of ways it's the same, if that makes sense. Like there's
Yeah.
an invitation that the earth is to us, that if we're just willing to listen, it will show us like how different and beautiful and amazing it is everywhere.
With saying that, you may have already answered the question, but I do have a question because when I have traveled, I found myself in a lot of cities, and
Yeah.
cities can be beautiful because there's
Yeah.
nature in cities, but I was just wondering like what you would like, what if you're in a city, then how do you like connect with nature and the earth when you're in like a concrete jungle?
Yeah. I love cities too. Actually, we went just on the weekend. I mean, we have a city close by here called Brisbane, which is sort of like probably the biggest city in Queensland, the state of Australia that I live in. And it's not a big city, but I mean, when you're used to living like my house here, I'm on acreage. I have my horses, my neighbors, you can kind of see them and hear them, but it's very like I just look at trees everywhere around me. So you go to the city for a night and it is very different because there's a lot of people bodies. There's a different energy. The energy is almost like, it feels like, and if you buy into it and you're like, oh, now I'm in the city, I'm surrounded by people and concrete, you feel your world getting a lot smaller, but you actually never disconnect from nature. Like it's always there. And whether it's like, I think we're fortunate most cities have some sort of greenery and nature in them. A lot of them have beautiful parks and stuff like that you can go and visit. But
Mhm.
it's also like when you're willing to be connected with the earth, you can always be connected. Like it's this thing where we think, oh, wherever I am right now in my body is where I am, but it's not true. Like I could think about you in Canada, you could think about me in Australia. And it's almost like if you're willing to open yourself up to that, you're there. Like you can allow nature and the world and the planet to contribute to you in all ways. You don't have to physically be in the middle of the forest to allow the forest to contribute to you. You don't need to be in the ocean to allow the ocean to contribute to you. I mean, it's really nice to get there and to spend time there, but it's also like
Mhm.
we're actually infinite beings. We actually occupy way more energetic space than maybe we've ever been told, and it's actually very easy to allow all of that to contribute to you if you let it. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, it like I'm like, do I take this question? Like I wonder what this question is. So like um as an infinite being, what is like, so I guess how would you kind of explain choice as an infinite being? Because like a lot of people are kind of like if I ask a question, someone's like, I don't know, and the I don't know keeps coming up, and I'm like, oh, but I can sense that, sometimes people aren't just, if someone says like, I'm depressed or I have ADHD, and then it's
Yeah.
like, but I can see them as an infinite being, like as an yeah, like more than just one thing. I see people as expansive and great. So like when I guess the question I'm asking is, yeah, like, so how would you talk to being an infinite being and having that infinite choice?
Yeah.
I didn't think this
Well,
conversation would go here.
yeah, I know. We kind of went on and we're like, what are we going to talk about on this podcast? And I know like a lot of your listeners do enjoy different subjects, so we can weave that in as well. And I think a lot of the time, the cool thing is if you look at this infinite being energy, it does address a lot of different things as well. Like, you know, a lot of the stuff people want to hear about is money and relationship and business and all that sort of stuff. But when you start to look at this space of like, oh, you know, am I an infinite being? Like as a first question. And, you know, if you get a no where you're like, no, I'm just like a body and like I just exist on this planet, well, that's fine too. But maybe start playing with it and allowing like some different concepts into your world. And I don't know what your listener base is and, you know, how woo woo and weird this might sound to some people, but a lot of the time, just even starting to play with a different energy is actually an invitation for something different to show up. It doesn't like mean you have to dive headfirst into it if that's not what you want to do. But, you know, if you're having issues in your relationship or with your love life or with money or business, it's like when those things start to come up for you, play with this infinite being energy. And where you said just now about when people, you ask them a question and they say, I don't know. It's like, well, the first question I have is like, do you not know? Or is it that you're just not willing to know how much that you know? Because I think the other part to this is like a lot of the time where we're taught to stay small. We're taught to like be controllable. We're taught to exist in a reality where we don't push the boundaries, where we don't ask those unanswerable questions, where we don't delve into places that people don't have a cognitive response to us. Because when we do that, like, I don't know about you, but as a kid, it was always like, Sarah, stop asking so many questions. Sarah, just sit there and be still and be quiet. When I was like, I don't know everything. And what does this mean? And how does this work? And blah, blah, blah. But from a young age, we're taught the opposite of infinite being. We're taught to be very finite and very controllable and very much be like put into a box. Like you just go there and you be this person and you do this thing for your life. It's like the whole question of like, oh, what do you want to be when you grow up? I mean, I'm 42 fucking years old. I still don't know what I want to be when I grow up. I'm like, I have no idea. I love what I'm doing right now, but that doesn't mean like in the blink of an eye that might all change. Like, and being willing to, yeah, being willing to not be conformed and controlled into this space, and where you start to look at it from that place that you actually have limitless possibilities and you have limitless things available to you. You've just got to be willing to start to allow some of that in. And again, it doesn't have to be that all of a sudden you wake up tomorrow and you're like, I'm now an infinite being and blah, 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 blah. It's like, what if you just started playing in these areas of like, okay, I want to have a relationship, or I want to make more money, or I want my business situation to change, rather than being like, I want this because I've already decided that it's wrong, or that I'm not good enough, or there's something wrong in this situation. What if it was more like this place of like, what infinite possibilities are available here? Like truly, what is infinitely available in this area that I may have never even considered? And just start to see, even playing in that realm, in that playground, what starts to show up for you, like what that changes when you rather than having a set of possibilities and choices that might be like 5 inches wide, you start to expand that out to being 10 inches, 15, 50 inches. Like you just start to open up yourself to more possibilities. And being an infinite being and choosing from that, it's really just about that. It's really just about being in this space of like knowing that, or maybe not even knowing, but just asking for what else is actually available beyond what anyone told me as a kid or whatever anyone showed me before. Like, what do I truly know in this situation?
Yeah, that's really cool because like as you're talking, like it also isn't cognitive, like it's not 1 + 1 = 2 or like A, B, C, D. Like for example, the other day I was driving out and and I could perceive like this universe, and I was like, okay, like and it was really cool. Like there's just a lot, it was really cool energy. And then as I continued on with my day, a lot of gifts were showing up. Like a lot of people were just being gifts themselves, a lot of like, it was really cool. So it's like, what if like that question, so the question could be like you said, you know, what infinite, what is truly possible here, like what infinite possibilities, and then even if you can allow yourself to perceive that and then just keep going on with your day and allow those beautiful things to show up. And it's funny because I think there's a lot of different listeners, like there's some people in 82 countries, there's a lot of people locally here in Canada, and so you know, there's, you know, some people who, like in this day and age, there's a lot of people who are very open and
Hmm.
exploring a lot of different things with energy and looking to heal themselves. And then there's a lot of people who are just like, yeah, I'm a human being and I'm gonna go, you know, like I'm just a normal person.
Yep.
And so it, and then like sometimes the woo woo stuff is just, they're like nope, not gonna go to the woo woo stuff. And then there's
Yep.
people who are like, give me your weirdest, craziest thing ever. So that's like, it's a mix of people who are like, I love listening to you, and um like be super weird or what. It's like, it's a mix of anything. So like,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. I love
It's like
that. And
totally
I
open.
mean, yeah, and I mean the cool thing about that is, and the cool thing about consciousness, which I guess really is what I'm an explorer of on in this lifetime. It's sort of like, okay, you know, if I had, because a lot of us, we want a purpose, we want a goal in life, which I think is great. I think it's great to have a target, somewhere to be steering your ship, like something to be aiming towards. And for me, I've tried so many different things and always found it lasts for 5 minutes to 5 weeks, and then I'm bored of it. I'm like, boring. And then I've always made myself wrong because I'm like, I can never finish anything, whether it's like, you know, I don't know, like learning a language. I tried to do that. And not to say I won't go back to that language, but rather than making myself wrong for not sticking to something, the thing that I found that works for me is that I want to explore consciousness and what consciousness is. And the thing I love about access consciousness, which is this cool thing that you know, I've actually made a job out of now, but it's also actually contributed to me building a dream life that I never thought would be possible as a kid growing up in Caloundra on the Sunshine Coast in Australia. Um, the definition that access consciousness gives to consciousness, if there was to be one, was something, it includes everything and judges nothing. So in that, there's such a space, because even for your listeners, where you have some people that are like on those varying degrees of like, hey, I have my life, I'm happy with my life, I don't expect anything greater, I'm not asking for anything greater, right through to those people that are like, bring it on, the more crazy shit that's possible. None of that, it doesn't make
Yeah.
any of it wrong. It's all included in consciousness. It's all included
Yeah.
in what we're talking about here. And just to circle back quickly to where I started with nature, I think that's also been such a huge draw card for me, with being so attracted to and drawing so much from nature and the earth and the planet, is because that's where it functions from. It doesn't judge anything. It doesn't know what judgment is. It doesn't function from time. It doesn't function from linearity. It just bees. It's like trees, desert, ocean, tornadoes, like volcanoes. It's like chaos. It's this energy of constant movement. And I think that infinite being energy as well, or infinite possibility, it's also like another cool thing to play with might be like, oh, if I was like a tree right now, like, would any of this even matter? Like, if I was the wind, like, what possibilities would be available to me? I mean, we have these amazing bodies that we can do so much and be so much with, but 99% of the time, I think we end up judging them and making them wrong. And so I'm also this space of like, if I was more like nature and I really had infinite possibility and infinite choice available, what would I choose? What would this turn out like if I could be with it in any way that was fun and joyful for me?
Wow, there's so much there, like especially with like nature not having that point of view. And like um like when I look at like the energy of trees, for example, it's very like um it's, well, nature is beautiful, so then that energy is very uh it's undefinable. And so what I was looking at was also like, I was like, because I'm like really like thirsty for life. And the consciousness part, I'm like, the greatest thing, I took a class recently, was realizing that yes, I would love to expand on consciousness and like live for that. So I was like, okay, so what's going to make my life greater? And I was like, oh, jumping in the lake, jumping in that fresh water. And so
Yep.
like it's actually getting there, doing that, jumping in the water, enjoying that, and doing it no matter what it looks like. Cause it's like, you know, sometimes it's super crowded there, but it's like really choosing that to do that and like take those steps to like create your life.
Yeah. And I just love that you asked a question too, because I think for a lot of people where you're living your life and sometimes you're like, but I just don't know what to do to change this situation. Like for anyone listening, like think of one thing out of the many things that you probably have going on in your life right now that you wish was different or you wish you could change, and ask a question. Like I love that you asked that question about, I can't remember exactly what it was, but it was like, how can I have more joy or expansiveness in my life? And then you got, I'll go get in the lake, get my body in the lake. But it's like anywhere where you come to a stuck point, it's just where the energy has stopped moving around whatever that thing is. So if it's that your relationship or money or something like that. So rather than going to like, my relationship sucks, or I don't have a relationship, therefore that sucks, or my money situation sucks. The only suck, quote unquote, or whatever that negative thing you're bumping up against is, it's just where the energy has stopped moving around that thing. Like it's a stuck point or a stuck point or a
Wow.
it's really that. It's really anywhere that you're
Yeah.
stuck on something and it's not changing. It's just the energy stopped moving. And the cool thing is, the one thing that I've like unequivocally seen change every single time that the energy has stopped moving, or I come to a point where I'm like, like I really don't know what to do here. I don't know what direction to take. Ask a question. Ask a question, ask a
Mm.
question, ask a question in that situation. And some really basic ones are like ones we've come up with already, but it's like, what would it take to change this? Like, what would it take for
That's a
something?
question.
Yeah. And what would it take for something different to show up here?
And that's a question too. Cause like I've noticed a lot of people kind of not really get what a question is. So when you're saying this, like, hey, so what else, like, so the questions was like, what's available? What is this?
Yep.
You know, like those are questions. Anyways,
Yeah.
like for the listeners out there, because a lot of
Yeah.
people like they it's almost like a foreign thing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, really, it's true though, Shauna, because the only reason we've ever been taught to ask a question is to get an answer. Like, even in school, like everything about our upbringing is question equals answer. Like, that's the only reason you would ask a question. But when you start playing with these questions, it's probably what in school was described as an open-ended question, in as much as these questions don't have a yes or no response. These are questions where you actually have to explore possibilities when you ask that question. So I think really what trips people up is everything we've been taught is that if you ask a question, you're asking it to get an answer or a result. But what these questions do is they're not about getting an answer or a result. They're about getting that stuck energy to start moving again. And once the energy is moving, then the possibilities have space to present themselves. And you kind of have this movement now. Like it's like anything. It's like when something stops moving, it stops. It's sedentary, it's stuck there. But then the moment movement starts to become available to it again, boom, all of a sudden, like all of these different possibilities and different outcomes start to become available because now there's motion. Like the energy is moving, there's motion around whatever this thing is. And there was something else I was going to say there about question, but it's gone. So we'll see. Train left the
Uh
station.
well well like yeah, questions, that's you know, good to know. That question will get things moving. And um for moving things, I had to consciously be like, okay, let's flow energy. And what I aim to do is like flow like through the universe, through me, through everybody. Like I'm looking to flow as massive as I can and
Mm,
include everything, include the world, include
yep.
everyone, and just flow.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because the other day I was like, it I could sense that. And I was like,
Yeah.
oh, cool. so it's like for people listening, sometimes it's literally just being like, okay, so literally flow all the energy through me. Well, I guess it depends on what you're flowing through. So it'd be like through, I do the universe, through everyone,
Yeah.
through my body, through the earth, and then I just keep flowing. And then so, you know, like if I perceived it one day yesterday, um it could be different the next day, and just like kind of a practice and like a request of the universe, and something you can play with for fun.
Yeah. Yeah. And I remembered as well. And with that, I love that energetic based exercises like that, and making it like a daily practice to practice energy flowing and like perceiving you as being part of that flow. And like when I first started doing a bit around energy, I would picture almost like a tsunami, you know, where a tsunami has so much energy available to it. And even when a tsunami dies down, like the ocean becomes still again, the wind dies down, that energy is still there. It's just showing up in a different form. So it's not like the whole time you're doing these flows, it needs to be like this like huge intensity, but it
Yeah.
starts to kind of train, it starts to, unless you want it to be, but it starts to train you to know that energy is limitless, that it's never going to stop. Even when a tornado is not a tornado anymore, it still exists. It's just not in that form at that current time. But what I wanted to really quickly bring up about question before as well, because I liked what you said at the beginning, where sometimes you ask people something and their response is, I don't know. Or how often do you ask yourself a question? You're like, I don't know. But how much again were we
Yeah.
taught? If you just say, I don't
Mhm.
know, then it ends. Like it's like, I don't know. So then you go, oh, well, if you don't know, I'm just going to let it go. Like, how often do we
Like
say,
move
I
on.
don't know, as a way to avoid what we actually do know? So, like,
Mhm.
if you're playing with these questions with yourself or with other people, and you ask yourself a question and you're like, well, I don't know, or you ask someone else a question and they're like, I don't know, a great follow up question is, well, what do you know? What do you know about that subject? What do you know about that? And if you ask yourself something about, you know, the possibilities with money or the possibility with relationship, and you get this energy of nothing, it's dead, I don't know, ask yourself another question. Well, what do I know here? What do I actually know about this that I've never acknowledged that I know about it? And then see what that, because, you know, sometimes we're very sneaky with things too, and we're like, oh, I'll just avoid what I actually know over here by telling myself I don't know anything. And people will do that with us too. They're like, oh, I don't want to explore that subject. I'm just going to say, I don't know. And hopefully you leave me alone and go away. It's like, well,
Yeah.
another gentle follow-up question might be like, okay, cool. But what do you know about it? So what do you know about this? Mm.
Yeah. Wow. Exactly. I think that's a great way to basically end a podcast, because that is like, because again, so many people say that, and I know we're coming up to like the 30-minute mark here. So I hope that gives people something to play with, because it's
Yeah.
so common. And you know what? It took me probably 10 years to take an access consciousness class. It took
Yep.
my mom 10 years to take an access consciousness class. It took me 7 years to start playing with the talk to the entities tool. So it just takes time, you
Yeah.
know.
And even like, you know, what you mentioned before as well is we live in a time right now, in an age, and I'm doing like the little air quotes, like quote unquote, an age or a time where this woo-woo stuff, like I remember as a kid, we were I was kind of into different woo-woo type things, but back then even meditation was seen as weird. Like if you were into
Yeah.
meditation 20 years ago, you were freaking over here weird. Now it's like businesses talk about like breath work, meditation, like the things that we are actually willing to look at has become so much more. So even though it took you 10 years, 7 years to choose some access, and even if it's not access, even if it's something like exploring
Yeah.
consciousness or whatever that is for you,
Yeah.
like also acknowledge that everything now is much faster than it's ever been, and it's getting faster and faster and faster. So also be willing to know that, you know, a lot of the headway's been made. A lot of the shit has been cleared out of the unconsciousness and anti-consciousness that has existed on this planet. So maybe it will take you like 3 weeks or even less. And then all of a sudden you're doing shit where you're like, oh my God, I'm like so woo-woo right now. But it's like, That's because now's the time for this to start to show up a lot more on this planet. So I'm really grateful to have had the opportunity to share a couple of tools and like talk about this stuff with you and your listeners. And yeah, I hope whatever you guys choose, that just play with some of these tools and ask a few questions and just, I mean, what's the worst that could happen? See what shows up.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's cool. Okay, well, I will share your website on this podcast, and I definitely recommend uh, booking a session with you, because I know that I recommend it because I think you have a very cool perspective, and the facilitation is very fun and powerful. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me on. And yeah, thank you for listening.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we will talk again, everybody, and stay tuned for the next episode. Bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone. Thanks, Shauna. Bye, guys.
Thanks, Sarah.